In this intense episode of Gold Shields, hosts Tom and Dan sit down with Tracy Walder, a former CIA and FBI agent whose career in the intelligence community was anything but ordinary. Tracy shares her adrenaline-fueled experiences in the Counterterrorism Center and her role in the drone program, where split-second decisions had life or death consequences. She challenges the effectiveness of targeting individuals in terrorism, emphasizing the need to address the underlying ideologies. Tracy recounts the pressures of her first major FBI case and discusses mental health in the intelligence community, security protocols, and future national security threats. Tracy's fearless dedication to service makes this episode a gripping exploration of the sacrifices made by those who protect us. Don't miss this eye-opening conversation on Gold Shields.
Gold Shields brings true stories from law enforcement, the military, true crime authors, and first responders. Experience the dedication, danger, and emotional toll with the heroes themselves. These gripping tales of true crimes, true stories, and true heroes are all here on Gold Shields. Welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy, along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm great, partner. Looking forward to this one, like we always do.
Yeah. I think today's going to be a lot of fun. In addition to some stories that I think are going to make our listeners really like sit up and take notice, she's just a fun person, and I can tell that about her already. But before we get to her, and before you'll do your intro, let's talk a little bit about our friends who help keep the lights on here.
Yeah, our premier sponsor, Streamlight.com. We're so proud to have them be part of our show and sponsor us. That was a big deal for us. And Streamlight, you know what? They protect all our men and women in law enforcement and the military in dangerous situations at night, car stops, empty apartments, alleyways, on the line, everything. They're out there protecting us in a different way. So we want to give everything we can, and a shout out to Streamlight. Check them out, streamlight.com. And they're going to be having some new lights soon that we're going to talk about on the show. So streamlight.com. The other really important thing to us and every law enforcement member out there is Copline. It's an amazing organization and an amazing helpline. Copline.org, 1-800-COPLINE. Completely anonymous, confidential. 24/7, 365. You got men and women in law enforcement that are answering the phones and talking you through tough times. And we all know someone that's going through a tough time in law enforcement that needs to talk to someone. 1-800-COPLINE.
Yeah, Copline is vital. I mean, Tom and I have dedicated ourselves in this show to a number of things. One of those is to make sure that we can do our small part to break down this stigma that has long existed in the law enforcement community that you can't ask for help, which is nonsense. And as a result, we have high suicide rates, alcoholism, drug abuse, divorce, all that kind of stuff that comes along with people holding on to traumas and difficult things and not sharing them. So Copline is a place for you to talk to a cop, not a disinterested third party, psychoanalyst who's answering the phone for $25 an hour. We're talking about cops who understand the pressures and the traumas. Copline is an amazing organization. The people that run it are so dear to us. We love them. And we recommend highly, if you have a problem, if you're dealing with something and you're from the law enforcement first responder community, pick up that phone, talk to somebody. They always say a problem shared is a problem halved, and it really is true. Copline, fantastic people. And just back to Streamlight for a second really quick. You jumped over this. What I wanted to say is any cop that's ever worked nights will tell you their best friends are as follows: their partner, their gun, their radio, and their flashlight. You can't exist working most of the day in any police agency without a really good functioning flashlight. Streamlight makes the best. They're the best, most durable, highest number of candles they put out. It can save your life. They do an amazing job. We love the people at Streamlight. One last shout out I want to give is to retired NYPD Detective Randy Jurgensen. Anybody who knows their history of the NYPD during the turbulent 60s and 70s in New York City knows that name. Randy Jurgensen was an exceptional detective. Yesterday, he was honored at one police plaza with a long decades overdue Combat Cross Medal, which is no small thing. And Randy earned it many times over. He had an amazing career. He's also the detective who held the torch for years on the case with a great amount of blowback from the department and the city and all sorts of forces on the brutal murder of Patrolman Philip Cardillo at the Nation of Islam Mosque on 116th Street in Harlem on April 14th, 1972. It was such an abomination of the way that case was handled, and Randy took it upon himself for years to run that case to success. Randy is a hero of mine, and I just want to give a shout out. Randy Jurgensen, congratulations on your much long overdue NYPD Combat Cross. So, Tom, who do we have today? She's waiting patiently in the green room.
Well, first of all, well said, and congratulations to Randy. You know what? We have today on the show Tracy Walder, who she's going to get mad at me and she's going to roll her eyes and shake her head, but who is a badass. Okay. And the reason I say that is because it's very difficult to be in the CIA and it's very difficult to be in the FBI. And this woman did them both, which is not the norm, everybody.
Who does that? Nobody does that.
Tracy that is not the norm. And she did it at a high level, not just, I was employed there. Tracy did some unbelievable stuff before 9/11, during, after, and so forth, and is the author of an incredible book, The Unexpected Spy, which we're going to get into, which can't wait to hear about. Tracy, welcome to Gold Shields, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom and Dan. I appreciate being here, and thank you to both of you for your service.
So I can't wait to read your book. I haven't read it yet, but I have read about it and done a little research on you, as you can imagine two detectives would do before we speak to somebody. But you went from a sorority girl, was it University of Southern California? Tell us about, how did you get into the world, and it is a whole different world, of the intelligence community the way you did?
You know, it's interesting. So I'm a little bit older. I'm a Generation Xer, right? So born in the 70s. And I always like to kind of orient audiences to the time, because it's really important to understanding why I would or wouldn't have gotten, into this career path. I think kids these days, especially seem really old, have a lot of pop culture, right, that puts the FBI or CIA basically right in their face. I didn't have that grip. I had none of that whatsoever. And so it wasn't a career that I thought was readily available to me, to anyone, quite frankly. I just didn't know a whole lot about it. I thought it was very James Bond, who I think was still Sean Connery at the time. Right? None of it was anything that I thought that I could, I guess, relate to, if that makes any sense. And so, I didn't seek this out as a career. I just kind of want to make that clear, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know, right, that it existed. But I think growing up, I was horrifically bullied all through school. I had a developmental disability growing up, and I was pretty introverted, and my dad was a college professor. And so I read a lot about history, about the Middle East, and my parents, thought travel was really, really important. And so I had a teacher my junior year who I loved, and he inspired me actually I wanted to be like him. So I became a high school history teacher. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I went to college to do. But my dad is a professor, or was a professor, and he was a professor at USC. So I applied to one college. That's where I went for free.
Smart.
I mean, it makes sense. Which was USC. And so I thought I was going to be a high school history teacher, because I wanted to be just like Mr. Hanley. But I still always was interested in the Middle East, because it was always an area that my parents would never really let us travel to. And there was just a lot of stuff going on at that time. It was quite the powder keg. It was always on the news. Yasser Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin, all of the stuff going on in the Middle East. But again, the time period, USC is a great school, but you really weren't taking classes on terrorism. Al-Qaeda was new. It had just been really formed at that time. And so again, I took history classes, but I was watching an interview in 1997 with Osama bin Laden, and it was Peter Arnett and Peter Bergen, and they had actually gone into Afghanistan to interview him. And it was the only interview that bin Laden did with a Western news station, which at that time was CNN. And I happened to be working out, watching it. And it was in that interview that bin Laden declared his fatwa or declaration of war against the United States. And that's when I got angry, obviously, but I got more curious, I think, too, right? And I wanted to understand what this was. I still needed to graduate in 4 years, though, to keep my free tuition. And so I thought, okay, what can I do to learn more about this, but still graduate in 4 years? And so I started taking Introduction to Islam, Modern Middle Eastern History, like whatever I could. Again, there were no terrorism classes. So I had no idea how I would apply this new thing I had become interested in. No idea. And so I went to a career fair one day with one of my sorority sisters. I didn't want to go. I was on my way to astronomy. But I had my resume on me because there were going to be schools there that were recruiting. And there was a table and it said CIA. And at that time, this is normal. They do recruit on college campuses. I think a lot of people don't realize that either. It's very common. And at that time, they were looking for liberal arts majors. So I went over to the recruiter and I said, hey, do y'all do this terrorism thing? And, which I know sounds silly, but again, we have to remember, this is a pre-9/11 world, right? It was not, Al-Qaeda was committing attacks, but they were in like sub-Saharan Africa, right? Kenya, Nairobi, all of that. But none of it, I was like 20. It didn't register to me. And he said, we're not really hiring in counterterrorism right now. Their big issue du jour was Russia, because as I say, Russia's always going to Russia. and then Latin America. There was a lot of coup d'etats going on. This is on the heels of like Noriega and all of that going on in Central America and then South. So they were recruiting people that spoke Russian and Spanish, and those were the areas of interest. And so I was like, well, it's no skin off my back. Here's my resume. Do whatever you want with it. I don't speak another language, but here. And they called. And I guess the rest is history. I started going through the background process. I got a conditional offer of employment. It was November of my senior year. It was contingent upon me graduating. And so I graduated and then I started 2 weeks later.
That's amazing. You know what? It's impressive that, and how did you feel about, and I actually just wrote it down while you were talking. You sit in a classroom and you're going through history classes and you starting to learn all the bad guys or everything going on in the Middle East. Then you're in the middle of it. Then all the people you were sitting in a classroom learning about, now you're checking out. Now you're into and kind of looking at. How was that?
That's an interesting question. So I have actually never thought about it, from that perspective before, because in my classes at USC at the time, no one was teaching Al-Qaeda. No one, because it just wasn't part of our, this was on the heels of the Oklahoma City bombing, right? That was the terrorism people were really sort of talking about. And so I don't know that I made that connection necessarily, but that's such an interesting, I guess, kind of way to look at it, because now I'm learning about these places, right? I'm learning about this religion, and then I go there, right? And I'm sort of thrust into it, which, yeah, I guess I didn't ever think about it that way, but that's such an interesting way to think about it.
So you get brought on board, you go through your training, which I imagine is extensive. And I don't want to ask you about it, but what was your first really duty and assignment? Can you talk about that?
So CIA works differently than FBI or law enforcement. At CIA, when you first EOD or enter on duty, you actually don't start training. You have to be at headquarters. They make you. You don't have a choice. And their philosophy on that is they want you to have an understanding of headquarters prior to going out to training, which I actually think is somewhat smart, because we're not law enforcement officers. We're not expected on that first day to be carrying a gun, to be carrying a badge, right? And so obviously at FBI, I went straight to Quantico because that's a necessity, right? You have to do that. But at CIA, it's not. It's a very different sort of situation. So I got very lucky, as I'm sure you know, in a government agency, you don't exactly tell them where you want to work. They tell you where you're going to work. And I got put right my first day in the Counterterrorism Center. This is pre-9/11. And everyone thought I was nuts because I was so excited. That's obviously where I wanted to go. But the cool people were all in the Russia branch, right? That's where the action was, right? That's where the more senior people were. And people just thought I was crazy, that I was so excited that that's where I was assigned. And then even more that I was in the directorate of operations, which is, we are the ones recruiting human assets. And so my first assignment or job prior to training was terrorist training camps. That's mostly what I was doing. And obviously the terrorist training camps in Afghanistan. This was kind of on the heels of, and I don't know if you all know or the audience knows, but Osama bin Laden had been found on drone footage. I want to say it was either 98 or 99. I honestly can't recall the year, but we saw him. It was very obvious. He was at one of the terrorist training camps. The problem is the closest jets, I think, were in Somalia. I could be incorrect, but I think that was the closest, and they just couldn't get there in time. And so that's what we were trying to do, was get as much intelligence from people on the ground in and around these camps, human assets that we had, to figure out who was coming, who was going, when will bin Laden be back, right? All of those things. That's what we were doing.
So while you're there, now again, putting it in perspective for everyone out there, pre 9/11, when bin Laden was mentioned here and there, you knew who he was, but you didn't know who he was. Oh, that guy was a lot of the terminology you used. In your world, though, at CT, how much were the red lights blinking on this guy? Like, how was everyone just like, this dude is a problem, and if we don't handle this, this is going to be bad?
No, I think that the red lights are blinking all day, every day, right? But again, people thought we were crazy, right? That's the thing, is that nothing had happened, right? Or things that were happening, were over there. Right, they were in the Middle East. They were in sub-Saharan Africa. And the American people didn't know about the attacks that we were thwarting, right? And because you can't, right? Like, you're only going to know if the CIA didn't do their job if we're attacked, right? Never the good stuff. And so that's the problem. But no, our red lights, I think, were always flashing and blinking. That it was just a matter of.
So was this before or after certain events like Cold War Towers, Cole bombing, which was 2000, embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania? This was before then, or was
I was
after
at CIA. I was at CIA when the Cole bombing happened.
Oh, okay, 2000. Okay, so things are getting hot in the Middle East, and U.S. interests are getting targeted. Right? We had the Beirut bombing of the barracks in 1983. And now we're ramping up in the 90s, and stuff is starting to hit our interests, and our people overseas are starting to get hit. What was the chatter, or what was most of the chatter about up to and leading up to 9/11, if you can tell us anything?
Yeah, of course. The chatter. So they talk in code. I'm sure y'all are aware of this. And I think that was the problem, is that the CIA we don't have satellites to collect digital voice intelligence, if that makes it. We just can't. And so we are relying on the NSA. The NSA doesn't give us full transcripts of conversations. They give us summaries of conversations. The problem is those summaries are really useless because they talk in code. And so basically what was happening was we kept hearing about a, quote, wedding, which obviously doesn't mean wedding. It meant a big event, clearly. And we kept knowing that the volume of chatter was increasing, right? Just because we hear them, but obviously you hear this big sort of influx, right? And we knew that that was occurring. And, obviously you have the infamous presidential daily brief that's been declassified and it's out there. It was the last one that CIA wrote about 9/11. But the problem is terrorists don't pick up the phone and say, we're going to strike on this date at this time doing these things. And so what are we going to do? The interesting thing is, obviously looking back, just before September 11th, chatter went to nothing. And that probably maybe should have been an indicator, but it's so easy, obviously, to be a Monday morning quarterback.
Yep. So in the interest of this and keeping the timeline we're
Right.
on,
I
take
know
us
I'm
through.
being very wordy. I apologize.
No, God, no. Listen, this is the best part about this, Trace. It's our show. We get to do what we want.
Okay.
That's the best part of this. So take us through 9/11 for you. Everyone has a story where they were, what they were doing. What's your world in CT or just personally happened that day?
Yeah, it's so weird. I was at CIA in the Counterterrorism Center on September 11th. I did not know that the first plane had hit the World Trade Center. Contrary to what people think, we can't bring cell phones and those kinds of things. We don't have open internet at CIA. So if you don't have your phone with you, if you're not connected to the internet, if you don't turn on the TVs in your office, you may not know necessarily, other than the cable traffic that's coming in, what's going on. But my phone rang from an outbuilding, and obviously I knew. We had to stay there for a couple of days, sleep there, do all the things. Just before September 11th, a couple days before September 11th, to kind of piggyback on what I was talking about, how we saw Bin Laden on Predator footage. Um, the community, the intelligence community, had made a decision to arm predators, and to start putting Hellfire missiles on them. That decision was made right before September 11th. But it wasn't supposed to be put into practice until like late spring of 2002. But obviously, September 11th happened. I was doing a good job in my office. So they pulled me and two other gentlemen out. And right after September 11th, they paused our training because we couldn't be gone for like 4 months. We were already there. And we came back, and I was the first person to work armed drones ever, with two other gentlemen. And so we were obviously one of the first in, I guess, in Afghanistan, targeting terrorists. And that's what I was doing for a long time.
Where do you go from that?
Well,
Other than
sorry.
that, Mrs. Lincoln, did you enjoy the play, right? So you're over there doing that work. At some point, you come back and tell us what your focus was in
Sure.
the post-incident, ramp up to the buildup of our intelligence community, all the other stuff that was happening at that time.
Yeah. So obviously I participated in a lot of stuff with the drone program. And then I was on duty the night that we lost Bin Laden in Tora Bora, as well. That was obviously difficult. And then shortly after that, not because I lost Bin Laden in Tora Bora, but because I was probably working 22 hours a day. You just can't like sustain that life. They had formed a bunch of different units at within the CTC that didn't exist before. And so I was put into a new unit called CTC WMD. So the government loves their
Oh yeah.
Love
acronyms.
our acronyms. Yeah.
And our job was not WMDs in terms of Iraq. I always have to tell people I did not work that at all. My target was a guy named Zarqawi, and I like to say that he was my target before he was cool. I worked him well before he established ISIS and went into Iraq. He was the person who had been tapped to be Bin Laden's like poison guy, and he was in charge of procuring poisons, dirty bombs, explosives, those kinds of things. And so then that took me all over the world, obviously looking for him, stopping attacks, looking for his accomplices, those kinds of things.
Now, part of this is part of the intel community, and what you do is gathering intel and speaking to someone, in interviews and all that. How involved were you with all that?
I mean, that's all I did. That was my job. And the questions I usually get about that are, do you know another language? No. But I think we need to remember that we're really one of the only countries in the world where most people speak. Um, I mean, that's the truth. Most of
Changing.
the higher, yes, it's definitely changing, but we're really one of the only, most people in the countries that I was in spoke multiple languages. Same with the terrorists. They were all educated in the West, which is disturbing.
So one of the things, and the reason I brought that up is on your website, I cracked up when I was reading this, that hiding in the trunk of a car, heading to an interrogation.
Yeah.
You have to tell us this.
Yeah, so that was actually pretty normal. The country that I was in was a war zone, not Iraq. But the country I was in was a war zone, and it was actually pretty easy to be a female and disguise yourself in that country. just because, there's hijabs, there's ibayas, there's burqas, there's all the things that actually make it pretty easy to disguise yourself. However, there was something that day with the other gentleman who I was going out with. He couldn't disguise himself properly. And so it would have looked weird to have him, who he was clearly, excuse me for saying this, a white dude. Like, there was no
I was
question.
waiting for you to say that.
And
Yeah,
he
yeah.
had forgotten like all of it. He had like nothing to disguise himself. Driving a car, and then to have a woman in a burqa or an abaya would have looked really not okay. And so the place we were going to was a classified location. And so what he did was like, just, do you mind going in the trunk? Because it was also unusual for women to be driving, right? So it didn't make sense. And the best place for me was to be in a trunk to go to that facility. And I mean, obviously I think back about it now and I'm like, why did I do that? But I mean, it made complete sense at the time for operational security that these are just things that you kind of do.
Yeah, you got to adapt to your environment without a doubt. So in all your travels and all the kind of stuff that you were involved in with CIA, there had to be some times when you felt sincerely afraid for your life. Is that the case? I mean, anything you can talk about? Because this is dangerous work.
So here's the thing, though. Thinking about your mortality at 22 is very different than thinking about your mortality at 46 with like a kid and a husband and all the things. And so I don't know that I ever truly was like scared for my life, because I don't know that I fully understood what could happen to me, because I was young and naive and really wasn't familiar with, I thought I was immortal, right? I think a lot of 20-plus-year-olds think that they are. And I think now in middle age, I don't think that, right? And so looking back, were there times that my life was in danger? 1,000%. I mean, we were accidentally fired on by friendly fire. I mean, and wasn't scared necessarily, right? Like all these, but I guess, yes. But at the time, I don't think I was scared. I mean, thinking about, I'm sitting there talking to a terrorist completely unarmed, right? They're not chained to anything. So like that's scary, right? But it didn't register to me at that time and at that age that it was scary, if that makes any sense.
No, I mean, listen, we all went through that. Ann and I were both bulletproof, and we've had conversations on this show and other shows that you look back at our career and be like, what were you doing? What did you do? About some of the stuff that we went through. But it is beyond impressive. And I'm not just saying this, Trace, because you're on our show. Impressive that the things you just laid out, you're 22 years old. That in and of itself is, with starting off with 9/11, before, during, after, your assignment as a targeter and being that. I mean, that's an incredible.
I was not a targeter. I was operations officer. So
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. But it's still, I don't get it. It's still impressive. I mean, that's something else. Now, fast forward a little bit. Bin Laden gets taken out. Where are you at that time?
I was actually not in the intelligence community anymore. I'd become a high school history teacher by that point. So I went CIA, FBI, and then I became a high school history teacher.
Okay. We're going to get to the FBI in a minute, but how did that feel?
So this answer will surprise you. Not super great, because the issue for me is you can't kill an idea. And the problem is we seem to think we take out these people, right? And that the whole idea and system and all of that will just die. And so what I was concerned about was that he gets taken out and now funding for CTC sort of dries up, right? And so that's actually what I was more concerned about, if you want me to be completely honest with you.
No, that's fine, and that's understandable. I think Tom and I looked at it differently. We would go after the subject responsible for A, and we knew we weren't going to change the culture on the streets of New York City. We knew we weren't going to change the hearts and minds of 1 million people who get by in their wits and their creativity and their criminal instincts. We weren't going to do that. But when you go into the realm of CIA and FBI and you're working in the counterterrorism world, it must be frustrating because there are a million people in line waiting to take up arms in the global jihad. So you're right. It's like working organized crime cases. You take down Paul Castellano, he gets shot. The next guy just elevates up.
Comes right back up. Right. They have people that they're going to fill in right into those positions. They're not just going to disintegrate and cease to exist.
In the darkest of nights, you need a light you can trust. That's why we rely on Streamlight. Whether you're investigating a scene, navigating through uncharted territory, or just need a dependable flashlight for those unexpected moments, Streamlight is your go-to source. With over 45 years of innovation, Streamlight crafts rugged, high-performance flashlights that can withstand the toughest conditions. From tactical torches for law enforcement to everyday carry lights, Streamlight has you covered. Join the Streamlight community today and see why professionals trust Streamlight for their lighting needs. Visit streamlight.com to find your perfect light. Streamlight, lighting your way through the shadows.
You were at CIA, and would you get bored? So I'm just going to become an FBI agent because you know what? It's next on the list.
No, CIA was actually my training was awesome. I can talk about parts of it. I have that in my book. I talk about crash and bang forest at the farm, poison school. I don't talk about everything because I can't, but certain things were cleared by them. So I definitely go into those in the book, and it was a whole lot of fun. I loved the CIA. I'm still friends with my managers and all of that. But I think what I realized was kind of mature is that, it's an overseas intelligence gathering organization. Like full stop, that's what they do, right? And so if you don't want to be overseas anymore, then you're literally just going to be at a death most of the time. And I was very passionate about the CT mission, clearly, but I was very burned out living overseas. I was just done. I didn't want to live overseas anymore. And I can't change that about the CIA. That is at its core who they are, and they shouldn't change, right? And so I made a mature decision to leave, not because I was like escaping a bad boss or people I didn't like. I loved it. I just made that decision because I knew I didn't want to be overseas anymore. And that's just not, I can't change it. And so I left on a Friday and I started at Quantico on a Monday.
Wow.
Of course you did.
Wow. That's something that I guess the average person doesn't know or even think about is the fact that you are, for all intents and purposes, deployed all the time. You're living in a different world, different country, under a different identity, and that has its stresses along with it too. Trying to act normal, trying to do your thing, and you're not in America. You miss America after a while, don't you? As Americans, we do.
I did. I mean, it made me very grateful, to be honest with you. I loved visiting other countries, and I think it's something, quite frankly, everyone should do. But yeah, I wanted to be stateside.
Yeah, we understand. But Dan and I both traveled a lot around the world, and I say to everyone, no matter how good a time you're having, no matter where you are, even if you're working, you have your downtime, you have your good time, there's nothing like home.
Of course, nothing
no
like
matter
home.
where you are. It was
Agreed.
always nice to come home.
Kiss
Agreed.
the tarmac. Yeah. Get off the plane and kiss the tarmac. I'm in America. Yeah.
So where was your first office in the FBI?
Yeah, so FBI, I went to Quantico, obviously graduated, all of that. And then my first office was the Santa Ana RA. I got assigned to an RA, not a field office, which is very unusual for like a new agent.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I had put down Los Angeles. That's where I'm for the most part from. And so I figured I'd get it. If you put down like San Francisco, LA, New York, no one wants to go there. So you're like definitely guaranteed. And so I figured when I opened my envelope that that's what I'd get, right? But I didn't. I got the Santa Ana RA, which is in Orange County, California, which is exactly where I'm from. And so I was very surprised that I got an RA. It's a little atypical, but I figured out real quick why I did once I started.
So you're in Orange County, which is not the world's worst place to be assigned, I would imagine.
No, it's home.
For commuting, for daily life, I mean, I would take Orange County over LA County any day of the week.
Yes.
Tell us about what you were assigned there, what you were
that's
working on there.
That's how I figured out why I was sent there. So this is before, and I think you all will actually understand this. FBI now gives lifestyle polys to everyone that is applying to be a new agent. At the time, they were not giving lifestyle polygraphs, to everyone that was applying to be a new agent. They were getting polygraphs, but not that dreaded lifestyle polygraph that I got when I was at CIA. It's 8 to 10 hours long. It can be 2 or 3 days. It is a lot. But that's the polygraph you have to have SCI, or sensitive compartmented information, or HCS, which is humans. But at CIA, obviously, I had that. Everyone does. It's very common. At FBI, at the time, not everyone had that. And so in Orange County, there was a case going on that was being worked in a SCIF, and everyone had HCS SCI. And so that's why I was put there. And it was not a counterterrorism case. I was very surprised. Like, why would you not put me working literally what I've been doing for. And it was not a CEC case, which was really interesting and weird, but that's why I was put there. They just wanted my security there. That was it. And it was the first Chinese economic espionage case in the U.S.
Not going to say I'm surprised at the bureaucracy that is the FBI. Looked at it through that lens. Not going to say I'm surprised. Nope.
I was surprised because it just didn't make sense. Like, just clear someone else, right, who's an expert in that.
Yeah.
It's fine. I loved working the case that I did. I mean, the guy's arrested. He's since passed away in prison since then. But I mean, it was a really cool case. I mean, we did all the things. We had a surreptitious entry warrant into his house, which are super rare to get. I mean, we did all the things that were cool. But yeah, it wasn't what I was working before, obviously, at CIA.
Did you get back to CT at all? Really?
You kissed it goodbye.
Welcome to the FBI.
Right. I was just going to say, I'm not, like Danny just said, I'm not shocked.
So the title of your book is The Unexpected Spy from the CIA to the FBI, My Secret Life Taking Down Some of the World's Most Notorious Terrorists. Tell us about, if you can, who some of those terrorists were that you were engaged in and involved in their takedown. If you can.
Unfortunately,
okay, all right.
I can tell you Zarqawi, obviously. A lot of the work that I did went into doing that. But unfortunately, we disrupted some poison plots that were in Rome and then in the United Kingdom and in Europe. But I can't say the names of some of the people.
Oh, that's okay. No, we get it.
Unfortunately,
okay.
Some of them are still alive.
So my other question is, does KSM really have bad breath? Perhaps one of the most unflattering pictures in the history of the American intelligence community and law enforcement world is the picture of KSM. It's just a regrettable moment for him.
I mean, I think the bag had just come off his head, so I think that's...
Yeah. It should go back on.
I love that.
Love that.
In the interest of public decency, it should go back on. Yeah. Anyway, we had a lot of fun making fun of him with that picture. I'll just say that.
That's so great. You know what? On top of your book, I want to let everyone know about this. Your Instagram account, The Unexpected Spy, is amazing. Anytime you're on, I'll watch your videos because it's so, you know what it is? You take everyday stuff and loop it into a security kind of video of what you should do. And I also love how you update people on a kind of real life level of what's going on in the world today. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But I love your videos. You're so spot on. I mean, you did one again. We mentioned it before on road rage. It's not just all counterterrorism spy stuff. It's everyday stuff. And it's awesome to watch yours.
Thank you.
In addition to that, writing the book and everything else, you said you have gone back to the world of teaching. Are you still teaching?
Yeah, so I taught high school for quite a while. I actually ended up teaching in the very same classroom with the very same teacher who inspired me to be a teacher, which is kind of cool. But now I teach criminal justice at Texas Christian University. I just do that sort of part-time, but it's probably why I do my Instagram account, is because I can even teach, I guess, a bigger audience and take the politics and the noise kind of out of it. I don't really give my opinions. I just kind of state facts and do with them what you would like.
Right. And that's the smart thing. That I think gets more people involved in listening and watching, in not giving your opinion just like, hey, here's A, B, and C. This is what's going on. This is why you should be, concerned. Have your head on a swivel because of A, B, and C. And I think that's a great move on your part. What I wanted to touch on now is September coming up. You had a very profound special visit to the memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I always get a lot of flack. I'm the national security contributor now at News Nation, and I always get a lot of flack because people tell me I smile too much or I seem too happy about really serious things. But I think what people don't realize is that is part of the diagnosed PTSD that I have, and that is my coping mechanism, right? Laughing or smiling at inappropriate times because my brain can't comprehend that, right? And the CIA, and I loved how y'all talked about mental health at the beginning. I love the CIA, but one of the things they don't do well is mental health because they really can't, right? That's a problem. You can lose your security clearance. And so that was one way that, and I know I'm getting off topic, that social media actually works in a really good way, was I kind of raged Instagrams by Senator because I was really upset that there was no money allocated. We're not considered veterans. And so there's no money allocated for people that either leave, in good standing or retire or whatever. We don't get mental health benefits as a result of that through like a Veterans Affairs situation. And so I reached Instagrams by Senator who was the head of the Intelligence Committee. I think he still is, Senator Cornyn, out of Texas. And he responded right away. And, he's like, I didn't know that y'all are not considered veterans. And, I went on to explain everything to him. And we just passed about a year or two ago in July, a $10 million allocation for CIA officers for an Office of Mental Health, and then also for benefits for individuals that suffer from that, because we have those high rates too that you all had mentioned before. But with Shanksville, I mean, it's been 23 years and I don't go to 9/11 memorials. It's just too hard for me. And I think people are like, but you're not weeping and you're not crying. It doesn't present like that necessarily. It's just not how it works. Because we were blamed for 9/11. That's what the 9/11 Commission said, right? Is that you're blamed for that. And so those almost 3,000 deaths, right, are on you. And so that's a lot to obviously process. So it's really hard to go to the memorials. But I was shooting something in that area and I had some free time. And I thought, well, it's an outside memorial. So I could kind of, I guess, like do my own thing there and just sort of listen, watch, right? Leave if I couldn't take, I don't know. And then part of me realized that it was very selfish. Like these victims didn't have a choice. They died. Right. And so it's the least I can do, to go there and see what it was like. And so I did.
Well, confronting things can be very therapeutic, right? I mean, avoiding them, it can be stressful and can build them up even worse. Confronting them can make them better, right? I congratulate you for having the guts to do that. It's a step forward. No, it's a strength thing. It really is. And I wish you all the best in your continued journey with all the stuff like that you have to deal with. If we could just flip for a second really quickly, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but when we got you on the phone and we got you on the show, we want to ask you things. 2024, the world that we're in right now, the way things are going, the geopolitical landscape is changing by the hour. What do you foresee as being the U.S.'s biggest concerns from a national security / CT perspective going into 2025?
Iran, 100% Iran. I feel like I'm banging my head against a wall. I always talk about this and no one seems to care, but I think Iran is a massive problem. I also think China, not from a CT perspective, but obviously from a national security perspective, they do like close to $900 billion a year in economic espionage damage, right? And that's a massive problem. I also think ISIS has resurfaced. They've never went away. And so I think I've been shocked lately that people are shocked that people are being radicalized online by ISIS when I know that that's been going on, right, since probably 2011. But, we're all just kind of having this awakening, I guess, about it. But I'm more concerned about ISIS individuals or people who sympathize with them, I guess, let's put it that way, here in the US already. Because I think, again, an idea, it doesn't look a certain way. It's not a certain type of person, right? And I think that's scary.
Do you think, I hate asking this because you said it before, is it a matter of not if and when again?
100%. I don't think it's, look, but again, I could be wrong. This is just as you guys know, Al Qaeda operates really differently than ISIS. They're just not the same. Obviously, their ideas are not completely similar, but somewhat similar. Al Qaeda tends to have very elaborate attacks, very planned out, very expensive, right? Because Bin Laden was rich, was footing the bill for all of that. ISIS tends to not be that way. It's a one-off situation, right? It's 3 people. It's, minimal money. And I think that makes it harder to track, right? When you've got kind of less moving parts, someone's less likely to screw up. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think really more soft targets are probably what we're our infrastructure.
Yeah, you mentioned infrastructure. I mean, if you want to destroy America, not that I'm giving anybody any ideas. I mean, you look at our water supply, our food supply, our power grids. I mean, just our cyber security as a nation. Individual organizations, China has made a full court effort press for many years now to hack into, all sorts of secret databases and steal everything from patents and original information to identifying information. It's just, that's how you take America down. You're not going to storm our shores necessarily, but this is a new way to do it, right?
100%. I mean, Operation Titan Rain, which was about 10 years ago, that's what China was doing. They're trying to see if they can get into our infrastructure, the Pentagon, and they were successful.
Well, you know what? There's for people out there, like the 3 of us sitting around talking, we all get when you say these things, like, but it's so huge, it's so complex with so many moving parts that you just hope the information sharing is there, the source reporting is there, and everything we need to stop this or prevent it, is just in place, and you just keep your fingers crossed and you hope for the best.
Well, we've made ourselves about as vulnerable as we can be by letting everybody come into the country. And we have all sorts of people streaming across the southern border from China, military-age males in clean clothes who, how did you get from China to, Nuevo Leon? I mean, how'd that happen? You made it somehow, and somebody put you there, and you came across the border. We've had as much as we've had one of our representatives having a long-standing affair with a Chinese spy. We've had one of our members of the U.S. Senate who was driven around for 20 years by a Chinese spy. I mean,
we have FBI agents too.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah. It's insane how much they have. They've infiltrated. They've made their way into long-standing pillars of our government and foundational pieces of our intelligence community, and they're there. What do we do now? I mean, how do you get rid of them? How do you identify these people?
I mean, that's the hard part, right? Because we can't profile someone just because they're Chinese or just because they're Iranian, right? Like we can't do that, nor should we do that. But I think also the biggest problem is we understand, right, that risk. But we're having an issue a lot of times in higher education where they're coming in and they're stealing those secrets there too in research labs. And you have this disconnect of higher education not understanding security and not wanting to implement it, right? Because there's supposed to be more. And so I think we just need to be a bit more understanding of some basic security protocols that we probably need to put into place.
Unbelievable. Well, like I said, we keep our fingers crossed. Tracy, where can everyone learn more about you, watch you, get your book, all that good stuff?
Yeah, you can watch me on News Nation. I'm recording for that right after this. I'm on most days. And then I'm obviously on Instagram and TikTok at The Unexpected Spy. And my book's on Amazon. If you want to grab it.
I recommend you do. A fascinating lady, and we cannot thank you enough, Tracy, for, first of all, your service to our country during a very, very critical time in those 2 agencies you worked in. We know we have an idea of how difficult and complex the work can be. And we wish you all the best in all of your endeavors. We'd love to have you back on at some point. And I don't know, just I know our audience enjoyed this. You are an insight into, we love to give, we pride ourselves on giving a backstage pass to a world most people don't see. And thank you for giving us some of that today. Despite the clearance issues and all the redactions that would be necessary, we still managed to talk about some interesting stuff, right?
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. You know, we always kind of run the risk when we have people in the intelligence community of kind of parsing through what we can talk about, but you did a outstanding job. This was so entertaining. I think we could do this for another 3 hours, but
she's got to go beyond News Nation. That's
Tracy, thank you so much for being on, and just echoing Dan's words with thank you for everything you've done for this country, for its citizens, and everything, you know, that encompasses that. Thank you so very much. And thank you for being on this show. This is our special time of the show that we send our prayers to our law enforcement officers, our federal agencies, everyone doing a really, really dangerous job, our military, that people take for granted sometimes. Oh, they'll do it. They're doing it. I don't have to do it. And they need our prayers. They need our support. And their family members need our prayers and support, because they're all in it together. If someone's overseas, like Tracy mentioned, there's a family at home. You know, so we need to acknowledge that and pray for all of them. See them on the street, give them a wave, give them a pat on the back in the store, say thank you. That's a big, big deal. That helps a lot, can change a day. That, and make sure you listen on all our audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, all of them. There's some that Dan and I don't even know we're on, which is even better. YouTube.com/@goldshields. Rumble.com/goldshields, watch our video shows, and our website, goldshieldsshow.com. For my partner, Dan Murphy, to an incredible guest, Tracy Walder, this is Tom Smith. Thanks again for joining us. Stay safe. We'll see everybody soon.